Yep.
enjoyable.
Yep. All right, we're starting up.
Okay.
And while I try to get things going, we'll just keep talking like things are normal, and we'll act like. See, it does that thing. Hey, we're on. So welcome everybody. Hey, Kira.
Hey,
How are you?
I'm hanging in there. How are you?
Oh gosh. How am I? Let me take a really simple question and make it existential.
I know.
How are you? How am I?
Are you?
How am I actually though? You know, people keep asking me, and like I want to answer truthfully, like I'm pretty bad, I think.
Yeah.
But then, you know this thing. When you tell people you're not doing well, then people will like later on be like, but how are you? Are you? I heard that you weren't doing well. Are you okay? And you're like, you know what? Never mind. Never mind.
Yeah.
I'm fine. Everything is fine.
I don't think anyone is doing very well right now.
That's the thing. That's the thing that I get to right there, right? Good morning, Leslie. Good morning, Betsy. Good to have you all with us. The thing that I get to for myself is, can we not all try to pretend that we're fine? Right? Like, we are literally in maybe the tail end, but still very much in the midst of the greatest public health crisis in 100 years.
Yeah.
And sorry for the brutality of this phrase, but like a 9/11th's worth of people is dying, of Americans are dying every day and have been for the last month. And we're seeing it go down now-ish, starting, and the vaccines are coming out and people are getting them. And this is all good, but like, we don't just like get to all of a sudden feel okay. Now-ish. Right? We don't get to just all of a sudden feel okay. Good morning, Mary Osterbrock. Good morning, Kathy Baggett. We're starting with your question today, Kathy. So you will be tended to. Your questions will be. Kira and I are going to dazzle you, razzle and dazzle you. And everybody else, we don't have a lot of questions waiting for us today. So if you have a question, you put it in the chat. And if you aren't watching live, you're watching this later. If you like what you see and you're interested, you can always try to join us live. You can also always just message either Kira or me and send us a question that you want to see us wrestle with and answer. I'm Philip Duvall, Church of the Redeemer, Cincinnati, Ohio. Want to introduce yourself, Kira?
Kira Austin Young, priest in charge, St. Anne's Episcopal Church in Nashville.
Yes. Man, Nash Vegas.
Yeah, I think a lot of kind of to the point about like nobody's doing very well. Like this, I've had a lot of emotions about coming up on like a year of this.
Yes.
And they're sort of like there being a little bit of an end in sight, but not really. Like right now, our vaccination rate in Tennessee, like if it continues at this pace, could take 3 years to vaccinate everyone in the state. And so it's like there's some hope, but there's also not. And it's like kind of wintry and gray.
Yeah, the weather.
And like the weather's bad. Like there's not really good options for like socializing outside and all the things that we were kind of like getting to do in the summer and fall.
Yeah. You're right.
My spouse accused me of getting too insular the other day.
You were like, just because I haven't left this bed in 3 days and binging Netflix and not responding to emails doesn't mean I'm being insular.
It was like, we need to get you out of the house.
I literally made my wife go out, like leave yesterday. Not in a mean way, like in like the gentlest way possible, but I was like, why don't you go do that thing? She's like, I could go do that thing. I'm like, I come to this office. There's no one in the office, but I do it 3 or 4 days a week, even just for a few hours, just to like be in a different headspace. And most people know, I live a half mile from work. So it's not even like I get like a big, long, like commute to like process anything, but just any kind of movement out of the house for a minute is needed,
Yeah, I live like a mile and a half from the church, so I went into the office yesterday, and that was helpful. Um, but like, even if I go into the office, like you said, like there's nobody really there.
Yep.
My spouse works in a kind of, it's a warehouse sort of setup with 100 other people, and I was like, I don't think you understand, like you get to see people every day.
Right.
Like, we're having a very different experience of this pandemic.
Well, and even like my wife Krista, like she was like, I'm like, look, I feel I need alone time. I need something to change, and she's like, you get out of the house every day. And I'm like, well, I go to my office and the doors like, and no one's here. She's like, you're not dealing with these kids every moment. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. Like, and she's got the studio for her photography, but like, it doesn't have walls that go all the way up. It's in one of those old like buildings where like the wall only goes part of the way up and then there's like an open area above. And she's like, I don't feel like when there's other people, and I don't want to sit wearing a mask all day.
Yeah.
So I want to point out on the chat that both Mary and Betsy are scheduled for their first vaccinations on Friday. And that is just an incredible news. I'm very excited for both of you. I hope that everyone is watching. First of all, Kira and we haven't talked about this, but based on what you just said, we're very much pro people getting vaccinated against a very deadly virus.
Yes.
So
I actually have been vaccinated. So tomorrow.
You have? That's right. Congratulations.
Yes. Because I do some chaplaincy work at Vanderbilt and
I totally forgot, and I knew that.
Yeah.
Sorry, tell your story.
I call and do things like that where I'm interacting. If I get called in, I'm interacting with patients. At the end of October, I was called into the COVID unit to pray with a man who was dying. And so when the spiritual care office called me in late December, and they were like, do you want to get vaccinated? I was like, yes.
Yep.
And I wasn't sure if I'd have the opportunity because like I'm just a contract worker, and I mean I have a badge and everything. And they were like, no, we wanted our contract chaplains to.
Makes a ton of sense.
So
they need you in there.
Yeah. So I'm vaccinated tomorrow. I guess it'll be like fully effective. My dad also managed to get a vaccination. He's in a different county, so it was a little bit easier.
That's beautiful.
So that's exciting. And also It's like, there's been so much kind of conflicting information about what you are able to do sort of post-vaccine. And, obviously I'm going to continue to wear a mask and do things like that. I'm not going out to bars or having big parties or anything like that. But
kiss everybody.
Yeah.
Just kiss. I'm just going to, not in the collar. That'd be weird.
Right.
That's so cool, man.
Yeah, it is nice to think about like my husband and I have been seeing my parents fairly regularly throughout the pandemic. They live like 30 minutes away. And to think that like every time I see them, I don't have to be like waiting.
This the time I'm killing you, right? Yeah, no, it's true. Well, I mean, Betsy's got family in Texas and in Denver, and she's like an avid traveler, and she's been homebound for the last year because she's taken this seriously and been careful. And just thinking about getting to like, she's like a month and a half away from getting to see family. Man, that's the thing, right? Like that's so close. You can like, but your point is still taken where we see the light at the end of the tunnel, but we aren't out of it. And I was saying like, we're trying to plan stuff at church right now for like Easter, and our experts have said like the numbers are probably going to start to go down in a pretty significant way, which means, we might get to have Easter in person. Now, it's still masked and distanced, but at least get back to, in-person worship and what that looks like. We haven't been in the building since last March.
Yeah.
And so anyways, it's part of me is like, they say the numbers are going to start going down. Apparently the numbers have already started to go down slowly, and we're going to start to see that, work exponentially. But there's a part of me that's just like, yeah, I'll believe when I see it,
Yeah. Well, there's like the numbers are going down, which is great. but they were also here. They were just so high.
That's the thing, is they're going down from a really high place, so they're still high.
I was like, they're still really high.
There's still thousands of people dying every day.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
So it's hard. And then there's also this threat of like this new variant that's more contagious.
Yes.
And they're saying there may be another kind of surge in March.
Right.
And it's sort of like just not knowing. Yeah, I'm not planning anything particularly in person until like fall.
Oh no, right. I mean,
Yeah.
we are talking about we are making some tentative plans and some outdoor options for the spring and the summer. But when we think about like what you and I would consider, what most people would say, like being back to normal,
Yeah.
I don't see that before the fall. And so just knowing that is part of the deal. But it is what it is. We're in the middle of as I said, a once in a lifetime, once in a century, public health crisis. Like, you know what? Like things can be weird, and we just have to like. Part of what we have to do is just say like, I actually think it's part of our job is just to say like not normalize the event, but normalize being anxious about it. Normalize allowing people to grieve and be uncertain, and not shame people for that, and not say like, no. If you have faith, please don't abuse people that way. That's abusive,
Yeah.
But do you have any little thing that you want to, like, now that you're like vaccinated, do you have any like little thing that you just know you want to do once you feel like, I don't mean like go on a big trip. Like I've asked people like, what do you want to do when you get vaccinated? They're like, go to France. I'm like, well, you're not gonna, so just relax. Do you have any like thing that you haven't done that you look forward to doing?
Okay, so this is going to seem maybe a little bit dumb.
Okay.
But what I really want to do is there's a place, like a casual kind of bar restaurant that I always used to go to after funerals.
Yeah.
And I would sit at the bar and have a beer and eat a burger.
Yeah.
And watch whatever sport that I didn't care about that was on TV, and just like vibe.
Yeah.
And that is like what I want
to
do, just to like,
those are the things we miss.
Yeah, like sit in a place where there are people, but they're not necessarily with me, and like where I can just like be alone but also with people. And just that experience of like sitting at a bar with a burger and a beer and a football game or a baseball game or a basketball game on is something I really weirdly miss.
First of all, do I get to know the name of the bar?
ML Rose is the one kind of like I like to go to. It's very, chill, and they have good burgers.
Yeah.
So
that's awesome. I went to a burger place in your neighborhood a couple years back. I think it's called The Pharmacy.
Yeah. That's like right close to me.
Yeah. That was good burgers. I miss long lunches with friends too, Mary. There's a place that Betsy and Mary know, and Leslie probably knows it from growing up here, called The Echo, which is a diner in Hyde Park Square. And I was there. I used to be there anywhere between 1 and 4 times a week. So I just want to go. Betsy's just going to go get Starbucks. Here's my thing. You know where you will find me the day after it is fully effective. I'll be at the movie theater.
Yeah.
I miss the movies so much. I just miss. That's my happy place. So funny because there are people who are like, now that everything's online and digital, like the movie theaters are going to die, and maybe they will. I hope not, but they're like, I'll never go to a movie again. And I'm like, oh my God, I love the movie theater. I love an empty movie theater. I love a full movie theater. Mm-hmm. I love when there's people all around me acting crazy. I love when I'm the only person there. I love the movies, man. It's my favorite thing. And I want to go to the movies so bad. Leslie's going to hug her friends and play board games in person. I like it. I like it. There's going to be a lot of hugging.
Yeah.
And crying. I'm going to cry a lot. Y'all need to be ready. You all need to be ready. If you know me, there's going to be so much crying. And like, don't worry about it when it happens. Like, it'll be okay. Like,
it's fine.
No, we can cry. Phil, are you okay? Yes, I'm crying because I'm finally okay.
Yeah.
Like these are the tears of a man who is okay.
Yeah.
Right? Because we finally get to be together.
Yeah, when I
Um,
suspended public in-person worship last March, I cried like a baby at that service. And I think a lot of people thought, and I to some degree thought like, well, maybe it'll be May, maybe it'll
yep.
be June before we're
I
back
told
together.
myself June. That was my little line in my head. 3
But a lot
months.
of
We can do
people
this.
thought it was only going to be a couple weeks. And I
Yep.
was like, I don't think we know when it's going to
That's
be.
right.
And to think that we're now almost a year out is like, I was going back through my calendar because I'm working on our annual meeting report for this
Yeah.
weekend. And like the first few weeks or the first few months of the year are like, they break my heart because my calendar is full of like meetings and dinners with friends and
Isn't that weird?
stuff that I was doing in person with people, celebrating my dad's birthday at this like
Yeah.
local winery. And
Now it's just like blank.
my mom called me the other day and she was like, so you got anything fun coming up? And I was like, no.
No, there is nothing fun.
I know.
Like, yeah, next fall when I go to a ball game
Or
in
like
the
a
symphony,
concert or
I'm getting season tickets to the symphony again because I'm that guy.
I have tickets to the symphony too.
Well, yeah, but you were like a classical music
I
man.
was.
When this thing's over, you and Mike got to come up to Cincy.
Yeah,
The Cincinnati Symphony Orchestra's, the CSO is one of the best in the country,
I
and the
know.
music hall is such a gorgeous building. And then I'm gonna come down to Nashville and we'll eat burgers at the Rose Spot.
Yeah,
And then I just want to go. My favorite bar in the world is in Nashville, right?
yeah.
The Station Inn.
Station Inn.
I got a poster of it on my wall right there. I from the very first time I went.
Yeah, that's
I still
Michael's
have it.
too. He really misses that and just going. We'll get a pitcher of beer. We'll listen to some bluegrass.
Popcorn, dude. Popcorn and Shinerbach, and listen to some bluegrass. Me and Mike, game on. I cannot wait. I love what Betsy just said, by the way, in the chat, and it's something that I want to acknowledge about myself because I don't know that people at the church know this. She said, "Funny how our ideas have changed." So you talked about your last Sunday where you suspended worship and you were crying. Like the Sunday before I suspended worship, I had no intention that we would ever shut down worship at all. The Thursday, we ended up just suspending the following Friday, the 13th of March. That means Thursday, March 12th was the day that I watched our governor's sort of what would now be considered a historic press conference. And before I watched it, that day, I was on the phone with my brother and I said, unless it's illegal, nothing will make me shut church down. I'm never going to shut the church down. We will have in-person worship no matter what. We will never stop having a Eucharist on a Sunday. Nothing could make me do that. And I get that people are going to make these different decisions, but it will not. I was saying that to my brother on the phone. I was completely minimizing what was happening and living in a sense of like, this isn't what it is. And some people will have to be careful. I'd had some parishioners come to church the previous Sunday and on their way out looked at me, and these are longtime members of the church, say, "You're not going to see us for a while." And I was like, my first thought was because of, huh? And I go, really?
Yeah.
I said, yeah. And I said, because of the coronavirus. And they were like, yes. And the guy says, Phil, we're really scared. Like, this isn't okay. And you got to do what you got to do, but you just aren't going to see us for a while. And I remember being like, in the moment to them pastoral, as you and I would both be to someone, but in my mind being like, I wasn't like idiots or whatever, like snowflakes. I was like, I mean, okay. I was so, when people started saying, one of my friends started making masks, and I was like, she's a great lady and she's a really talented craftsperson and these masks are beautiful, but we don't need these.
Yeah.
I was so that person. the reason I say my church doesn't know that is like, because essentially we've been incredibly aggressive in terms of our shutdown. And I've been very, very, very conservative in the truest sense of the word about people's lives and being careful. Our leadership has been. And so people probably within our church are probably surprised to hear that I was so cavalier, which is something that I need to work on with my therapist, of course. But like, because once what happened was, we have a nurse on staff at the church, and my communications person both were like, they basically called me and were like, did you see the press conference? And I was like, no, but I can catch up the highlights. And both of them were like, you need to watch it from beginning to end. And like, I watched the whole thing and was like, oh, we have to close everything down. Everything I said this morning was wrong.
Yeah.
And I have a Christian responsibility to my friends and my neighbors. And I don't care if it's legal or not. And in fact, in Ohio, they always had this allowance for religious freedom.
Yeah.
Fine. I mean,
Right.
I'm not a politician. I'm a priest.
I think that's right.
Right. Like, I'm not like, I don't know. I actually don't know if I even say it's right. I just know I'm not a politician. I'm a priest. That's right. Their decision. They had to make a decision based on, you want to make decisions based on constitutional law. But when people have said we have the right to assemble, you are correct.
Yeah.
That seems to be the case. We will refrain from doing so. And so I've been really aggressive about that. But I've also was the guy who was like, we'll never shut down. Okay, we'll shut down for 3 weeks. Yeah. Okay, it'll probably be till June. Okay, fine, I'll wear this mask. And now I'm the guy who's like, all right, we'll see what happens. Maybe we'll be hanging out in November. I don't know. I mean, like, but so to Betsy's point, funny how our ideas have changed. Like, part of the pain of all this process is that I've had to allow myself to change. And change isn't fun. It's not fun. Who wants to change? Ugh. People like you and me, Kira, what's to change?
We're already perfect.
We're amazing.
That's the way we are.
Leslie was going to see Hamilton live. Hamilton was coming back to Cincinnati too, Leslie, and I was going to try to see it this time around. So all these things.
Yeah.
Yeah. What a time. I love that you brought up eating a cheeseburger after a funeral for 2 reasons. One is I'm torched after funerals. Funerals and weddings. I love both. A lot of priests don't like them, and a lot of priests specifically don't like weddings because they're grump faces who should get a different job. But I think weddings and funerals are the absolute glory, best, wonderful thing. And when they're done, like, I'm a puddle on the floor. I'm useless. I hate going to receptions. And part of the reason I hate going to receptions that people is because after the funeral, I'm useless. And I'm such a social person that when I'm in that environment, I want to be social. But when the wedding is over, the funeral is over, I feel spent and I feel so like useless. And like, I'm like, what am I doing here? But so I love you bringing this up because it's really important for me on 2 levels. One is I feel very much the same way. Mm-hmm. And I love that you have a ritual around it. And we're surrounded by death right now. And I don't know if you've had to do more funerals. We haven't had a lot of funerals so far, but we've had some. But to not be able to enact any of those rituals for your own sake and sanity and self after leading a group of people in grief is difficult. So that's my number 1 reason why I'm bringing it up. Number 2, how screwed up are we as a culture in our inability to grieve and talk about and acknowledge death? We're experiencing mass death, and we have no place to put it. And right now, there are people in my neighborhood, in my community, who are arguing till they're blue in the face about getting their kids back in school because their kids are missing out. Mm-hmm. And they don't care that the teachers haven't been vaccinated. They don't care. They say they care, but they don't care because they want their kids in school. And look, it's a tough situation. There's like no easy way forward at all. I don't want to minimize like there are people whose kids are at home and there's kids who are being left behind, not in terms of academically, but like because our schools keep certain kids safe. Now that's a whole other issue about our culture. Right. Where if you're depending on your school for food, like literally, like, because, like that speaks not ill of your family, but of our culture.
Yeah.
That is the kind of thing we would allow. But I was talking to some teachers yesterday and they're scared.
Yeah.
And the reality is they're being forced back into these situations as a result of our inability, our collective inability to understand how to handle death and how to grieve it. So I wonder, and maybe you have no answer to this because you didn't know I was going to ask you, but like, do you have any like thoughts about any way for us as a people, as Christians, to process, like, what has this mass death, like, what's it doing for you? How are you processing it? Like, is there a space collectively as a community, as a Christian community for us? Like, what have you thought about in terms of this stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been
Because you're a big fan of death.
Yeah, it's just been so hard to find, like, not just death, but the space to grieve everything that we've kind of lost during this time.
Yes.
And when that happens, like, for me, it kind of bubbles up at sort of less than opportune moments, or, I'll find myself in like kind of an emotional funk. And I think, it kind of waxes and wanes. I'm very, very concerned about our collective lack of observing this grief. And I'm hopeful in that we now have a president who acknowledges that this is something to be grieved, who very in his personal life knows very deeply the grief of losing loved ones. And how and in my opinion is a very is a person of faith, of strong faith, of somebody who has found comfort and meaning in that in his Christian Catholic faith. And so to me that gives me hope, because I think part of our role as leaders, whether that's a political leader or a religious leader like you and I are, is to kind of model that space, creating, maybe that's creating a ritual. Like St. Anne's, we participated in the thing last Tuesday where we rang our church bells, and had kind of a moment of prayer. And I had, 3 people kind of gather on our outdoor labyrinth, and we on Facebook lived it and said some prayers and lifted up those names of, fortunately, we have not had anyone in our congregation die from COVID, but we've had people in our congregation who have had family members die. So we lifted up those names and prayed for them, prayed for our country, for a peaceful transition of power. And even to just it doesn't feel like enough, but to set aside those moments of at least an acknowledgement that this thing happened. Because I think that's part of what we're really, I've kind of asked this question and I don't know what the answer is. Like, I don't know if our governor here in Tennessee has he written letters to people who've had family members die of COVID? Has he visited, the nurses and the doctors who are in the critical care units who have, been with those who have died? Because when a natural disaster happens, everyone is, at a rush to kind of be seen walking through the rubble and shaking hands and comforting people who've lost things and lost people. And yet something about this, I don't know if it's because it's a disease or because the people who are most at risk of dying are people that our culture kind of deems almost unnecessary, or, not productive members of our society. They're older, they're sicker, and
or they're a different color than many of us, or they're below poverty line.
The impact of this on particularly Black people, particularly Indigenous people, is
catastrophic.
Really, really something awful. And so I guess I think some of our some of our pathology as a country is this relentless optimism. And honestly, I think some of our issues stem from never really grieving 9/11 appropriately. And not just the
No,
not just the
we
loss
just
of
went out
lives.
and no, we went out and bombed things.
Yeah, and not just the loss of lives, but that loss of like kind of security,
Yeah.
that loss of this sort of optimism about like our place in the world. And we lost a lot of things and we never really grieved them. And so I don't have a lot of hope that we'll be able to do, to grieve appropriately. And I'm discouraged by the number of things I've seen where people want to put off having a funeral, or want to put off um, having some kind of ritualized experience around somebody's death, because they want it to be, they want to they want it to happen after the pandemic.
Yeah.
And to have everyone there and to be able to sing and all of that. And I don't know if that's necessarily the right call.
And it's so tough to make that decision. What we've done a couple different things. We've had some people who've held off completely. We've had some people who did an immediate burial rite with just 2 or 3 of us, and then want to do a public celebration later when they can do it. Mm-hmm. And then most recently, we did one with someone who actually, he did die of complications from COVID. He had other conditions. His death is the kind of death that those who want to minimize the tragedy would point to and say, well, he had other things going on, comorbidities.
Yeah.
Fine, he'd be alive right now. That's what I know.
Yeah.
If we'd as a people taken this seriously, my friend would be alive and not dead. I mean, that's what I know. But his family decided to do a Zoom memorial as the service. Mm-hmm. And it worked, and it was really beautiful. Now, obviously, things have changed also, as you said, we didn't know how long this would last. So when someone died last June,
right,
we thought we'll be back together in the fall. Mm-hmm. And now it's like, so now what do we do? I had a wedding scheduled for last April. Both the bride and the groom work in the medical field. Yeah. So they are very reasonable when it comes to what's appropriate. And they were like, we want to hold off until this long. And then they were like, we don't know how long this is going to take, but we want to get married on that date. And we may do a public thing later, or we may not. Can you meet us in the park on this date, on our normal date? Can you meet us in the park? And it was me, masked and distanced, and the photographer genuinely 20 feet away, and the 2 of them. And that was the wedding. And I made the photographer sign the witness line. It was so cool. But yeah, I mean, like, I went off on a tangent because it was so fun. But but that's right. Like that, like we haven't even figured out how to like grieve in this, the normal way, the things we grieve. So we're like holding off grief. Like somehow when this is all over, we're going to grieve. There's this thing I think about in this. There's an old folk song that I heard Jerry Garcia and David Grisman do a duet of it. And it's like, it's like I forget, one guy's asking another guy questions, and the David Grisman and Jerry Garcia are singing back and forth. And David Grisman says to Jerry Garcia, your roof's leaking. Why don't you fix it? Mm. And he says, well, when it's raining, I can't get up on the roof. And when it's not raining, it's not leaking. Yeah. Like you don't notice the leak when everything's fine. And I feel like right now it's raining. We can't get up on the roof and deal with anything. Yeah. My concern is as soon as it stops raining, we're going to be like, listen, it's sunny out. Can we just all be excited about the sun? It's like, no, actually, look, the insurrection is over. So can't we just move on? No, because it was really damaging. Right? Lisa Grubbs is joining us. She's worked in the medical profession for quite some time and works alongside people, especially people who are in the margins of community. And she's a major advocate in her life, not just in her words, but in her deeds for people on the margins. She says, "Hi, held off grief is awful. My mom wouldn't bury my dad for 3 to 4 years. My brother and I just weren't in that spot anymore. Our emotions don't pause in a healthy way." That is huge.
Yeah.
Our emotions don't pause. That's important. Like that's.
Yeah, I had a really meaningful, this was pre-pandemic, but I had a parishioner whose father had died, and they had kind of a family thing, but it wasn't really what was meaningful to her. And so she called me up and she was like, could we have like a little bit of like a service for my dad, and just kind of gather at the church and like say some prayers and read some scripture and kind of do a service that is meaningful to me.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, absolutely. And it was just kind of her family, like her and her husband and her kids. And, you know, she had an opportunity to kind of say a few things. And it wasn't long, but it was sort of what she needed that she didn't get. You know, it's been this thing, a trend, or I don't know what to call it, where people are like, I don't want a funeral. I don't want people crying. I
Right.
want to have a celebration of life.
Nobody wear black. Everybody wear happy colors and everybody be happy. And I'm like,
But people are sad.
you died.
And
We're sad about it.
yeah.
I agree.
And I think too, we need those places where we can be sad. And like that doesn't mean we have to like mope around, and
Ooh.
we can laugh, we can tell funny stories, we can remember the good times. But those are always like bittersweet because it means we're not going to have more of those. And
yeah.
and to kind of pathologize like I mean, no offense to people who want a celebration of life, but I want people to be sad when I die.
I offense to them. I have to say, like I've told people, I want you wearing black. I want there to be crying. I don't need it. I'll be receiving my heavenly reward, or deep in the cold ground until the resurrection day, whichever one literally works. But either way, you do your thing, you do you, but please don't shield it. I mean, now okay, we're church nerds. Here is my church nerd least favorite thing. And we're guilty of it here. It's something that I have not fully been able to change the culture of at this church. We still like I will see, we've had services here that are, you know, we have a service. Our funeral service is called the burial rite.
Burial of the dead.
Burial of the dead. That's what it's called.
Mm-hmm.
And I will open up a bulletin and it will say a celebration of life. It's the same service, it's the burial of the dead, right? So we don't change the service. Or we will get to a softer language of memorial.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'll take memorial over celebration of life. And if you are a person who has asked for a family member to be and if I'm offending, here's the deal. We end up caving because when someone dies, we cave on all sorts of things because in the end, we care. We care about you. We want to get it right. We care less about being right in that theological way sometimes than we just care about like your heart and knowing that you are cared for in a really difficult time. That is important to me. And I am someone who will bend all sorts of rules in places of grief because I'm just not interested in.
Right. That's not the time to have this like theological fight.
But right now you and I can have it. And here it is. Like, I want it to say a burial of the dead on my funeral service bulletin. That's what we're doing. Is there celebration in that? Of course. But there's also grieving. And it isn't all celebration. Like, you and I have both experienced burial services for people that they died way too young. Something tragic happened. And we're not celebrating anything. This sucks. Like, and the forced, again, like, and you and I believe in the resurrection of the body and the life everlasting. But the enforced, like, if you believe in that, then this is really, we should celebrate, it's borderline abusive.
Yeah.
Like, just let people be miserable. Like, my God, let us be miserable. You don't pause. Our emotions don't pause in a healthy way, Lisa says. That's the thing. We're 40 minutes in. We haven't gotten to our questions.
I know. This is my whole thing about, like, you're like, what are we going to talk about? Like, well,
I'm never actually worried about what we're going to talk about, but I do like, here's the deal, especially since it's been you and I working together, like, I do like the interactions, but I do want to make sure that people who are joining know that, you know, their questions will be responded to, and that we aren't just, it matters that you're here.
Yes.
That we're not just doing this in an echo chamber matters to me. And we want to be able to be responsive to you all, but you're all still getting to know us together and all of that, and we're getting to know each other in this way. Here's a question from our friend Kathy. What is the first story in the Hebrew scriptures that you think is factual, literally true? That is her question. Now, I'm assuming she means, now here we go. Let's get nerdy.
Yeah.
First, I'm going to assume she means in the order of the Bible as we read it, not necessarily in the order that it's written. We'll start with that thing, because I believe some scholars believe the earliest text for that is accepted as scriptures might be Job, which is kind of phenomenal to think about.
Yeah.
But we're going to go in order for the sake of something. But I also want to, to give you a chance to think about that question, because I've already thought of my answer. Some of you, the conversation around how we approach our scriptures is ongoing and it's a necessary conversation for us to have, because I am not personally a fan of, I actually really like the way Episcopalians read the Bible. I'm not a fan of the way Episcopalians talk about reading the Bible. I actually think our practice of reading the Bible is very healthy and beautiful, but we talk about it in a way that can be very dismissive. So for example, and so we want to understand. So if you're coming in from a different denomination, or you're watching this from a different tradition, or you're lifelong Episcopalian, like, we have been taught a false dichotomy. That either you take all of the Bible as literal facts that occurred, or none of it. And the Episcopal Church hasn't done a good job narration-wise in narrating a third way. What I've read in Episcopal Church literature, not just at a local church, but like on a national level, was in the Episcopal Church, we take the Bible seriously, not literally. And that to me is hot garbage. Hot, steamy, dumpy garbage from the Valley of Gehenna. I won't have it. Because there are plenty of things in the Bible that are literally true.
Yeah.
Maybe, for instance, the resurrection of Jesus Christ. So I have a real problem with the language that the false dichotomy of serious versus literal. I also have a problem with the false dichotomy of either literal or you think it's a lie. Because I grew up in the denomination of sort of like, either you believe this is all literally true, or you're saying the Bible's a liar. That's problematic, because it seemingly purposely denies and ignores genres and what their purposes are.
Right.
So I want to enter into this conversation by saying, at least for myself, and then I'll shut up and Kira can go. But like, there are aspects of the scriptures that I believe to be literally true, literally factual. There are other things that I don't know that aren't. And then there are some where I don't know if they are or not. And I even think pressing the point is problematic. And I always fall back, and maybe it's too easy for some, but sit with it for a little bit and see how you do with it. Someone once asked one of my favorite theologians, Karl Barth, do you really believe there was a talking snake? And his response was, it doesn't matter if there was a talking snake. What matters is what the snake said. And that is a really beautiful sidestep. It sidesteps in the sense that it doesn't answer literally whether or not there was a talking snake. but it's not a sidestep. It allows for the possibility that maybe there was. Whether there was or not isn't the point of the genre, of the story that's being told. So I won't sit here and tell you that there was no place called Eden and there was no snake. I won't say it. I have some thoughts about maybe whether there were or not, but I would never say categorically I wasn't there. What do I know?
Yeah.
So I would be I'm very careful personally in our conversations in my conversations with scripture, about what I believe to be factual or not. Lisa Grubbs, virgin birth, walking on water, various miracles. I believe in all those things literally. Yeah, personally, literally, I believe all those things happened. They're totally impossible, and I believe that they occurred.
Yeah.
That's personally. As literal facts, which is why they were so remarked upon, and why people didn't just follow Jesus because he was a good talker. Like, there were plenty of good teachers who had way more interesting things to say in some ways than Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the stories that we're told are the reasons people took him seriously were because
the threefold thing is like, he's either a liar, a lunatic, or the Lord.
Right. But yeah, the C.S. Lewis quote, right?
I know where I fall. Like,
right. He's either a liar, a lunatic, or the Lord. Right. I agree. Okay. So I kind of tried to give kind of like just create a little bit of groundwork for how we talk about literalism in scriptures. And first of all, did I say anything that is inherently problematic?
I don't think so. I guess I'm a little more generous about that. Do we take the Bible seriously, but not literally quote?
I get angry, but it's a point of contention for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think the issue is that nobody takes the Bible literally. Like, not even the people that say they take the Bible literally take it literally, because nobody reads the Bible and then, the people that say they take the Bible literally, I don't know of very many who have read the Bible and then give away all their wealth, or
plucked out any eyes because they looked at someone the wrong way, or who believe that God held the sun over the earth in a very specific way, like it says in Joshua. Like I grew up Lutheran, and Luther was like, well, that didn't literally happen.
Yeah.
So
I think when we talk about, what is literal, what is factual, what is historical, we certainly are wrestling with a concept of genre, like
right.
what is sort of more mythological in its telling versus like what is sort of written down as a kind of history or a self identifying kind of story. So I mean, my like slightly dismissive answer to your question is like Genesis 1 is the first factual.
That's what I was gonna say. Yes.
Like, in the beginning, when God began to create, like, this is the first fact. But I mean, to answer your question a little more generously than that, I mean, I think, we don't have like historic evidence that something like the Exodus happened. We don't have like archaeological evidence that a group of people left, were enslaved in Egypt and then left, and settled in the kind of mass way that the Exodus tells. I believe we don't have archaeological evidence that like Joshua marched around this town and the walls fell. Like, we don't have that archaeological evidence. Does that mean it didn't happen? Like, not to me. But I think once you get into Judges, you start getting into more of like what we might call historical facts.
You can find
people in charge. This is what they did.
You can start to see that. I was gonna go first and second Samuel, but I think you're probably right, Judges. There is archaeological evidence and historical sort of cultural evidence for an overwhelming what the people of that time and place would have considered an extinction level event, flood occurring.
Yeah.
And people surviving it. So that we might say that literally happened, but maybe we wouldn't say it literally happened the way it's written. But then that's part of the problem, is that's what we talk about. Like, but that there was a flood, and I believe there's archaeological evidence for essentially, the birthplace of humanity being somewhere in the vicinity of where where Eden is listed. Although even that Eden, I don't know if you've done this work already, Kira, but like there are 4 rivers that are listed, and 2 of them are findable rivers and 2 of them are not.
Yeah.
So even the geographical location of Eden is sort of like fudged, but not fudged isn't right, because fudge makes it sound like you had bad math and you tried to make it work. More like they took 2 real places and 2 figurative places and said the story is found at the crossroads. I don't know if they were being that clever, because I don't like to just ascribe cleverness to something that's much deeper and more meaningful. But on some level, you to locate yourself in the second creation story is to locate yourself somewhere at a crossroads between his history and myth, and to say this space, the crossroads of history and myth, is the birthplace of our relationship with God and our humanity. And that's its own whole psychological thing. But I mean, my literal answer was, the very first line is, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And I'm like, well, I literally believe that.
Yeah.
And the order in which things are created, the day thing doesn't track, but the order in which things created seem to be fairly in line with sort of like evolutionary like understanding of how things evolved over billions of years instead of days. Fairly, not perfectly. So in some ways, the first story is one of the easiest ones to believe, at least some aspects of. But I like what you're saying from a historical, we can point to it perspective. Stuff in Judges and then stories about Saul and David. These are sort of, we're starting to get into a history that we can measure or understand.
Yeah. I mean, and I remember, I think it was the last time I was in the Louvre Museum in Paris, and I was in one of those, rooms with all of these like very ancient artifacts. And one of them was a tablet kind of telling the story of a battle. And it was a battle against the Israelites, what they referred to as the Israelites. And this was written from another tribe's perspective. Right. But it was kind of mind-blowing to me, because I was like, oh,
right,
like, this stuff happened and there are kind of historical records about it, but from the other side, like from the other telling of events.
Right.
So, if something happens.
How did the Israelites look in that telling of it?
Pretty weak.
Yeah, right.
Inevitably, if something happens in a situation, say you have an encounter, or like, let's say, when I'm sitting at the dinner table tonight with my husband and he says, how was your day? And I tell him, oh, Phil and I recorded this thing.
Right.
Phil and I are going to tell our spouses very different things about what happened during this conversation.
Yeah.
And both of those things are true.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, that's a whole Rashomon sort of like, no, I'm with you. I think that's right. Like, how we understand these things. I get really prickly about literalism in both directions. I get nervous about being dismissive of things that are literal. Mm-hmm. And I think my prickliness comes around, do we not believe in a God that is powerful and that could do mighty things and is acting in this world to save us? And I take very seriously and literally Paul's admonition to his church in Corinth. If Jesus wasn't raised from the dead, then death is it, and then we are of all people most pitiable. Like, we exist, we literally exist, Paul says, in response to this event. Like, it happened, and that's why we're here.
Yeah.
As Christians specifically. And listen, if you don't want to be Christian or you don't buy it, like, that's cool. I believe in a God that loves you, and there's a place for you, and you have much to contribute in the world, and it's not like it's okay, it's fine. But like,
working to believe it. Like,
right. No. Right. Yeah. If you want to believe it, or you're like, I don't know about it, but I'm going to stick around with you. No, totally. I just mean to say, I come from a place where you don't have to be Christian to be loved. You don't have to be. Part of my prickliness around really saying this is what Christianity is not because I think a bunch of people are going to hell. It's actually because I think they aren't. and that it's okay if they're not Christian. It's just really important then that we understand what it means to be Christian. Like not I need everyone to be this. You start to when you're afraid that everyone who's not Christian burns in eternal conscious torment, then you begin to freak out and try to make everyone Christian. But when you believe in a God who is more gracious and loving than that, and who creates space for something grand, like a grander vision of reconciliation and healing, than that, then whether or not someone is Christian in this life, it just takes on a different, it doesn't mean that it doesn't matter, but it takes on a different understanding. And so and so I want to be like, look, you don't need to be Christian. It's okay. But and you can be Christian and not know what you believe. Also, that's also okay. But I do want to be clear, like, about the Christian body, that as a body, we proclaim certain things to be real. And the miraculous work of God in Jesus Christ is one of the things that we say, this is a real thing. This is changing lives, and not just making you feel better or be a nicer person. That we believe that something happened that that actually did something and is doing something. So that's where I get like kind of funky. I also get worried whenever we like use the idea that something wasn't literally factual as a way to dismiss dealing with it, the implications of it. Like maybe God, there wasn't a literal moment where a literal God told a literal man named Abraham to take his son up to this mountain and kill him, and then go a different direction with it. But we believe in a culture that told that story as definitive to itself. So whether or not you believe that it was a literal reality, you belong to a body that understands that story in a really as foundational to its self-understanding. And so whether or not it literally happened is secondary to what does it mean.
Yeah, I think one of our problems as sort of modern or postmodern people, however you want to categorize us, that post-enlightenment people, I think, is that we really end up asking a lot of the wrong questions of the text and of ourselves. And we're dealing with this ancient text and we're asking modern questions of it. And that is where I think there's a lot of times sort of a disconnect. But I want to say that like last week on Twitter, somebody posed the question of like, don't you ever want to say I'm a Christian, but not one of those weird ones?
Right.
And my response was like, I'm absolutely one of the weird Christians.
Right.
I believe a man rose from the dead.
Right.
I meditate on my own death.
Right.
I eat the body and drink the blood of my God.
Right.
I pray to have the grace to be able to give away all of my wealth.
Right.
That seems pretty weird to me.
Pretty weird, you weirdo. Pretty weird.
I would love to be a weird Christian.
Yeah. And I also like it speaks to our mainline. We have been taught that we should never let our Christianity get in the way of being the right kind of upstanding citizen in whatever community of which we're a part. And allowing right kind of upstanding citizen to be defined by the community and not by God.
Mm-hmm.
So it's okay to be a Christian so long as you don't, it doesn't change you.
Yeah.
So long as it's not transformative, it's okay. And which is fine, except that the whole purpose of the Christian faith is transformation. Now, I understand that we are oftentimes often doing that in response to people who have used zealous faith to injure and harm and kill others, to oppress them. We get a lot of people from the Episcopal Church who've come from denominations where they're just limping into our church because they've been so harmed, or if they've survived at all.
Yeah.
So we recognize so much damage can be done in the name of faith. but the response to that is not, we'll just have a little bit less faith and don't believe anything difficult, and then you can be safe here. It's that we are not just we're not just a church about what we aren't. We need to be really clear about what we are. Our presiding bishop said, like, look, we're not all about the full inclusion of LGBTQ plus persons in our church because it's cool or au courant or progressive or urbane or cool, whatever the word. We are that because we believe that this is what the gospel is telling us to be, because of what we believe is true about Jesus and what Jesus' work has done. And I think that centering ourselves on Jesus is the thing that can allow us to really be transformed in our own lives and transform this world. And it's weird coming off the aftermath of January 6th, where we saw people whose faiths, whether it be in their version of God or in their understanding of who the president was or is, or who, or just their whatever, led them to think, well, we aren't going to conform. We're going to do something really, and so much, we're going to do something really radical. And so much of our aversion to it was that this radical thing happened. Don't they understand? But like, we shouldn't be scared of a radical act inherently. We should be scared of the violence and the hatred within that particular movement and recognize that. But that, I don't know. I'm not sure if I'm making sense. I'm still trying to process what happened 20 days ago, because it wasn't even 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
But I want to be careful that I'm not sounding like I'm saying like everyone should all be radicals. But I also don't think that radicalism is inherently bad.
No, I think that's right. I saw like a headline or something that said like something about like de-radicalization or something, and I was like, what if we don't want to be de-radicalized? Or the root of the word radical is radix, is root. And when I look at like the Magnificat, Mary's song, like that's a very radical song.
Yep.
And I think it's, what are we being radicalized toward?
Yep.
And for me, that answer is Jesus.
Right.
And the flourishing of the world around me. And I think a lot about when I was going through my divorce, I had a lot of options in terms of how I could act or how I could approach it. And different people, including my lawyer, wanted me to approach it in a way that I did not feel was faithful to my understanding of how God and how my faith would compel me to act.
Right.
And I certainly wanted to stick it to him and revenge and all things. And there were times I kind of had to say, like, no, I'm not comfortable with doing that.
Right.
Even if it means that I
suffer. Yeah.
Or I don't get, everything that I could get or whatever. And that was a very hard thing to do and very hard conversations to have, because I don't think my choices sometimes made sense to the people around me.
Yeah.
But I wanted to feel as good as I could about the way I behaved in the aftermath of that situation. Yeah,
because it's because in the end you got to face God.
Yeah.
I still like that. I mean, like, meet your maker. Like, I still think like that. Like, every once in a while I'm like, when you die, you go face to face with Jesus. It's not like he's going to kick you out because you took too much in the divorce. But what do I want on my conscience when I'm there? That's the real question. Like, what do I want between me and Jesus? Right. Well, this is good. And I'm glad that you were Christian towards your ex during the divorce. But when I come to visit you in Nashville, can we go toilet paper his house?
I mean, not to say that I was perfect or anything, but I mean, that was at least a consideration in my head about like how I was going to.
Yeah, but I'm just saying people can clean up toilet paper. I'm not talking about like eggs or anything. My daughter is like, I've like, she learned about, like, we saw some show and they were going to toilet, and I said, yeah, you toilet paper someone's house. And she was like, what is this thing? And I'm like, oh yeah, I used to do it when I was a kid all the time. She's like, you did? I was like, oh yeah. She's like, are we going to do it someday? And I was like, I don't know. Like, do people get shot now for doing it? Like, I don't know what the rules are.
Prank call people and stuff, and you can't really do that now.
What a gift it is to be able to chat with you today and to be with you guys, to be with Betsy and Mary and Kathy and Lisa and Leslie and whoever else is joining us. If you're here and you are quiet, thanks for being here. If you join us later at some other time and you're watching this, man, thank you so much. We're having so much fun getting to know each other and do this. Kara, are you going to be back next week?
Yes, that's the plan.
Okay. What have you been listening to this past week?
So a friend of mine posted a inauguration day 2021 playlist on Spotify.
Oh, nice.
And it is, it slaps in the vernacular.
All right. As the kids like to say.
The kids say, just a lot of like fun, uplifting pop music.
Good.
And
Good.
Like kind of breakup music, but in that like empowering, get out
like
of here.
Taylor Swift breakup music, not Adele breakup music.
Like Beyonce breakup music.
Yeah, yes.
And so I've been listening to that, like not only just around the house, but like when I work out too. So that's been, and like also some like oldies, or 60s, 70s kind of protest music.
Good. I've been going like I've been getting really mellow lately. I've just been in a really hard place to listen to anything upbeat. And I get really melancholy. Like melancholy is a place I like to hang out.
Yeah, Enneagram 4. Woo!
That's right. That's why I use that word. So I told you about Connie Converse last week. And I've been listening to some other sort of like some old Joni Mitchell. Do you know who Vashti Bunyan is?
No.
Listening to Vashti Bunyan, she's like, she put out one album in 1968 or 1970 and it was not a hit. So she just disappeared. And then she came back and put some more stuff out. But it's sort of like Nico ish, but she's got a prettier voice. No offense to Nico, who has her own thing going on. Josephine Foster, Iris Dement. Iris Dement does a whole album of gospel and spiritual tunes.
Mm-hmm.
And that blew my mind. I listened to that on a walk the other day. Who's the other one? And then I've been listening to, last night I went on a piano kick and was just listening to doing a lot, Martha Argerich playing some Bach piano solos. But then, why, some things are overplayed because they're so damn good.
Yes.
And here it is. The Clair de Lune is stunningly beautiful.
Yeah.
It's overplayed because it's one of the most beautiful pieces of music that's ever been created by someone. And it's all the things it should be in a very little package. So it should be overplayed. And I listened to it 4 times in a row last night. And it was just, and then I started to listen to some Eric Satie piano.
Yes.
Okay. This week I'm going for some Heinrich Goretzky. I'm going to do some spiritual minimalism.
Okay.
But if you have any advice for me or any recommendations for anything at all,
Yeah. Melancholy for me is like all Phoebe Bridgers.
Yeah.
Like Julian Baker.
Yeah.
So that's my like melancholy. Also, I listen to a lot of when I'm in a melancholy space, like sometimes my husband will come downstairs and I'll be in bed with like a glass of wine, like listening to like 90s country breakup songs. And he's like, are you okay?
Should I be here? Are we still together?
Like, I'm just having feelings right now.
Sitting in just let me have this.
Yeah.
My wife does not know what to do being married to such a sensitive human being. Like, on some levels, she's really grateful. And on another level, she's just like, all right, okay, buddy, you and your feelings, got it. You've got them. Okay, great. It's a tough nut to crack. We're late. Thank you all for being with us. If you're still here, if you're not, whatever, God bless.
Great to be with you all. Have a wonderful week.
We'll see you next week. Right?